everyone. Welcome to January 19th, Facebook Live, Sewing Loopy French Terries. Before I get into that, I just want to remind you that it's not too late to sign up for Sew Confident Series 10, 2021. This Friday is the day that we send you a link for the very first video class to make the Mason top. So watch for that. For those of you who are signed up for the year, you're set. You've got the 12 classes coming. For those of you who signed up for the month of January, you'll get the same email. But remember, you can still sign up for either the year or the month, either way. And remember to order your kits. For those of you who ordered black kits and night sea blue kits for the tops, we did expedite that shipping so that I think you can pretty much be guaranteed that you're going to get your kit by the time the class starts on Friday. But you also should know that you can watch this class anytime once you get the link. On the day that we send it to you, for the rest of the year, for the rest of your life, whatever, that class does not go away. So there's no particular timetable to watch it. We're just encouraging people to try to keep up with us on a month-to-month basis. So we're really excited about Sew Confident, but you're going to hear from us more on Friday. Let's see. One other little notation. We have the sewing, my book, Sewing Knits Fit to Finish, is back in stock. So it had been gone for a little while. For those of you who don't have that book, it tells you everything you need to know about sewing knits, from very fine tissue knits to heavy sweater knits and everything in between. So I'm really proud of the book, and I hope you'll partake in getting it. So we're going to talk about this interesting fabric today called Loopy French Terry. We've been talking about French terries for the last couple of months, but the French terries that I've been showing you then are really fine. Smooth on the surface and very fine little loops on the wrong side. But today's French terries that I'm going to show you are very gutsy. So for instance, this one is a navy blue and cream texture on the face. So this is smooth, but there is a texture to it, kind of a heather texture. And the wrong side is the heavy loops. This is very drapey, but it is rather lofty. There's some thickness to this. So this is the navy one, and we have the coordinating yardage that is, it's a rib in terms of how it's structured, but it also can be used as yardage. So it's not the traditional rib as we know it that you can only use for cuffs and collars. This is a fabric that you could use for cuffs and collars and trims, but also as pieces and parts of a garment. So there's a darker side and a lighter side, and you can certainly use either side, but it definitely coordinates with the navy. So you get these two different textures. It's really fun to see that. We have a couple of other colors of it. We have a gray, this heather gray. So this is the lengthwise rib side, and then the reverse side, the horizontal loopy side in the solid. And it's coordinating, I use the word rib sort of loosely here. It is a rib texture, but again, different yardage that you can use to coordinate with it. And then we also have it in black. And this time the black, same texture as the other two, but you have the lengthwise ribs, which I'm sure you can't pick up on the screen here, on one side, and the loops on the other side, but both sides are black. And we have a ribbing that goes with it that's a little different character than the other two ribbings. This is a beautiful cotton organic ribbing with a very, very fine rib to it that can also be used as yardage or as ribbing. When you're using a fabric like this and inserting it as part of a garment, you don't need to worry about shortening the lengths or changing sizes. Just cut it out as you normally would for the size of the pieces that you need, and it'll work just fine. So those are the Loopies, the loop French terries. And then I wanted to show you some garments that we've made up. So this is the Brando Jacket. Now this is a little different than what I have on the wall, but it's very, very similar. But you can see that I've used two different textures. I've used the face of the fabric for parts of the garment, and I've used the, quote, wrong side of the fabric for other parts of the garment. We have this surface-mounted, great zipper. We have these wonderful black and white zippers. And this is some exposed cover stitching that holds it down. And then I've underlined the entire piece in cotton jersey. And then I've used some of that cotton jersey for these little shoulder pieces, accents, epaulets, whatever you want to call them. But this is one of the most comfortable garments that I own. It's comfortable and pretty warm as well. So I pulled out a couple of cotton knits that I think would make great accents on any of these loopies. I don't know why I'm calling them loopies, but there you go. I think this would be a really pretty combination of the dark charcoal with the pale gray. I think it actually also works on the navy. And I even like it on the black as a little bit of a contrast. But a nice, stable cotton jersey. And then sort of like what I have on, a pale lavender. This is a cotton jersey in the lavender. It's not exactly the color, but it's close. And I think it would be great with any of the colors as well. So these cotton jerseys have some stability to them. They're nice and smooth. They're easy to work with. So I just pulled out a couple that I thought you might like. So in addition to the Brando jacket, we have a couple of other garments that I think would make up great in these loopy French terries. So the Bristol pattern has two versions. It has a dress pattern like this, and it has a shorter one as well, more of a top. This is made in exactly the fabric that we're talking about that's on the wall back here. So the face side is the heather gray. The reverse side are the loops. And then the yoke and the sleeves and the bottom band and the back insert of this garment are in the ribbed yardage. They sewed together just beautifully. It wasn't as if the rib drew it up or anything. They just blended together just fine. And notice that we've added some stripe for the accent at the neck and the cuff. We love stripes here at the Sewing Workshop, especially for neck bindings and so forth. Here's the short version of the Bristol. And this one is made completely in the ribbing. All the pieces. This time we've just reversed it. So we use the dark side on the body of the garment and the lighter side for the trim. So it looks like you have coordinating fabric, but in fact, we're just using the, quote, wrong side of the fabric for the outside. I just think this makes the most perfect upscale sweatshirt. Perfect pattern for this fabric. Just exactly what we're all wearing now, both inside and outside. So the Bristol top and dress are a favorite. I have a couple of others to show you. This is the E shrug, meaning it's a download pattern. Doesn't have sleeves on it, just left them off. And it's a real simple pattern to make. It only has shoulder seams, no side seams. And people have asked me in the past, could you make this particular garment reversible? And including in the French terry. And I think that if you did an overlapping seam technique at the shoulders, then it would look the same on both the inside and the outside. So this is a perfect garment to think about doing as a reversible garment. You would see the wrong side of the pattern of the fabric. This has been lengthened, I believe, from the pattern, but the instructions of how to do that are in the pattern. If you want a nice cardigan to slip on when you get cool, the Anne's cardigan would be a great garment to use in the loopy French terry. Nice and drapey, super comfy, not very many seams. And then a good old standard and favorite of ours is the Eureka top. And notice again, we've used a little bit of binding in a regular knit for the neckline, the bottom, and the sleeve. It just adds that nice accent. So think about that. We have the Brando jacket, Eureka top, Anne's cardigan, and Bristol, and then the garment that I made over the weekend, which is the Barcelona. I was a little bit of a panic about getting ready for this week. For some reason, I was really busy and didn't know if I'd have time to make this. But when I finally sat down to make this, after I'd cut it out, which didn't take very long, I sewed this in about 3.5 hours. I am not a fast sewer. I was still working out some of the bugs of what seam allowances to use, how to do this nice trim on here, and even with that, and even had to thread my serger a couple times. Even with that, I sewed this very quickly. So to me, I could make this in less time than going online and trying to buy something that may or may not fit, or getting in my car and heading to the west side of town to buy something that was not nearly as cute. But in this case, I've used the loop French terry for the body. You can see the wrong side. But I've used the rib for the cowl inset and the sleeves. So what did I do to make this particular detail happen? Well, the pattern piece for this cowl is the really odd looking piece. You don't see this very often. Here's the shape of the inset of the cowl. This is the collar that wraps around your neck and seams on the left-hand side. So this garment has a seam on the left side of the cowl that dies into the shoulder seam. But I removed all of the hem allowance, which happens to be about 2 5/8 inches, and I took away an additional 1 inch, and I think I could have even taken away maybe another 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch and been just fine. But I didn't want a lot of scrunch up here. I wanted this to really be a feature of that neckline. So hem allowance is gone, and an additional at least 1 inch of the pattern is gone along the top edge. So let's talk about how we did that. I'm going to get my easel, and we'll just get right into this binding technique. So I started by cutting a piece of fabric about 2 inches wide. And because, as you can see on the wall, there are some stripes there, and those stripes run horizontally. The stripes run horizontally. But I wanted to cut this so that I could cut my pieces this way so you could see the stripes in a regular way. So 2 inches of fabric, and you can see that it's curly because that's a jersey, and it's curling because I've cut it this way, it's curling to the wrong side. Normally when you stretch a jersey on the cross grain, it curls to the right side. But going the other way, it's on the other direction. So right sides together, I'm putting this along the edge, and I'm stitching a 1/2 inch from the raw edge. And I'm stitching really carefully so that it's very even so that I don't have to trim it. And I'm stitching it at 1/2 inch because I want my edge to be at least a 1/2 inch when it's finished. I want that red and white stripe to be about a 1/2 inch. So I'm just wrapping this over the edge. I'm using my long pins to pin in the ditch. And that's where I'm going to sew. So I'm going to sew right here in this ditch. Because I've calculated the 2 inches, I have a little bit extra here. So I'm going to use my Karen K. Buckley scissors. I am crazy about these scissors. These are my new favorite trimming scissors. I don't use them to cut yardage necessarily, but I definitely use this for trimming in conditions like this. So I'm placing those scissors sort of flat on my fabric, and I can just slip those in there and come along and really get close. I'm not used to trimming in this little position here, but you can see how nice and close you can get so that when you see the inside of the garment, it looks really just as good as the outside. And it's really because of these scissors. They have a little micro-serrated blade on them, so it really grabs the fabric. I love them. There's another detail on this garment that I really like, and that is the drawstring. Normally there's a pattern piece for a drawstring that you sew wrong sides together, turn it, and so forth. But this is a super easy way to make a drawstring. So in this case, I've cut the fabric 1 inch wide. And then I've anchored this on my ironing board at one end, and I'm going to give this a big pull. And then I run my steam iron. I don't touch it to the fabric, but I'm holding the iron over it and steaming it. And that'll help hold that curl in place so that I have this little tubular piece. Now, I didn't have quite enough fabric to get a whole long piece, so I just pieced it, and I have a little seam in the back of my drawstring inside of the garment, and nobody will ever see it. Tied a little knot at one end, and it's all finished. But I got to show you the next best tool. This is so cool. Tell me again, Erin, what these are called?
Easy threader.
Easy threader, yes. Don't need that on there. All right, so I have my tube of fabric, and I've pinned it to the eye of this easy threader, the big eye. And now all I have to do is push the blunt end of this through one buttonhole and continue it all around and bring it out the other side, and it makes really quick work of drawstrings. I've owned one of these for a long time, and I use it all the time to just repair those garments where the drawstrings come out and you can't find them again. We'll just yank them out and start over, and this is fabulous. We just started carrying these, so they're on the website. They're only $5. It's a really, I guarantee you'll use it if you own it. So those are my little tricks for the binding. And you can see on the wall back here that I've pulled out some stripes that you might like as trims. The red and cream stripe is what I've used here. The same fabric is in the black and cream. We have the gray and cream, and that happens to be the same fabric that I have on under my Brando jacket. And this garment that I've made is a swing tee that has a seam on the diagonal, and it opens up into a little potential tie sort of affair here. So you have this asymmetric hem, but very comfortable fabric to wear. It's cotton and spandex, super comfy. This happens to be the same fabric that we're using in the So Confident Maison top kits for January. So it's, those of you who have it know it's wonderful fabric. And then we also have the yellow with the white stripe. So those are the four stripes that I pulled out that I thought would be really pretty with either the black, the navy, or the heather gray. So now let's talk about just sewing this fabric, period. You would think that I wouldn't be able to create a long list of how to sew Loopy French Terry, but as it's turned out, I have a long list. This is one fabric where you can't use chalk. It's not going to show up for markings. It's going to disappear really quickly. It's going to get buried in the loftiness of this fabric, so don't even try. You can clip your notches in the seam allowance, but you're going to want to use tailor's tacks for any dots and interior markings that you need to identify. Because this fabric is so stretchy, I use knit stay tape in white 99% of the time. So I'm showing it to you in black, of course, on a white fabric. But I reinforce the shoulders and the neckline. This is a fusible tape that's a pre-cut 1/2 inch wide, and I've placed it so that it's centered over the seam line, so that when I and I'm putting it only on the back piece, the back shoulder, the back neck. So when I'm putting my right fronts to this to meet the shoulder seams, I'm stitching at 5/8 and I'm stitching through this stay tape. So it really holds it. There's still some give, so it's not like it creates the garment really to make it really rigid, but it can relax just a little bit so it still has the properties of a stretchy knit garment. But you're going to want some of this knit stay tape for a lot of things, but I use it mostly for reinforcing and stabilizing edges like this. Polyester thread is my thread of choice because it's a knit. Walking foot, in my opinion, in this fabric is essential. By the time you get 2 thicknesses of this very soft fabric, it does, I guess, press together fairly thinly in a way, but when you're sewing it, you have a puffiness around your actual presser foot. And so you want to be able to move both pieces of fabric through the sewing machine at the same rate. And you're only going to be able to do that with a walking foot. In fact, I put a walking foot on my machine sometimes, even though I have an even feed feature that I can engage. Because that walking foot is just another notch up in its ability to feed the fabric. For my seams, I stitch at my 5/8 of an inch, and then I use my isocord thread to 3 thread and serge the 2 edges together so that I have one seam that I can press in one direction, generally towards the back. But I did have to widen and lengthen my stitch on my serging. You'll get a feel for how easily the fabric feeds through the serger, and you want to be sure and catch all of an edge. Sometimes with lofty fabrics, a serging will kind of fall off the edge, so that's why you want to widen it. And the lengthening of the stitch will allow you to go a little bit faster and it doesn't hang up so much. And you don't need that much thread anyway. This was kind of a big deal. This took a few tries on a sample to figure out how to set my differential feed on my serger so that I didn't get wavy edges. And I realized that I adjusted my differential feed to the max number that there was on the dial. So you'll want to make some samples right here and make sure that your seams are lying flat. When you're serging, you don't want to take off very much. You want to leave the seam fairly wide. If it's too narrow, you're going to get a lump. This is already a fairly bulky seam, so just keep it as wide as you can, a good 1/2 inch, if not more. You're just shaving off the hairs, basically. If you're sewing the rib fabric to the French terry, you want to sew with the rib side up. Your presser foot is not going to catch so much, and with your walking foot, it'll feed more evenly together. Where I had curved seams, like on shoulders or sleeves, I'm always pressing from the right side of the fabric over a tailor's ham, and then I can't really press without a sleeve board. I think these are 2 essential pressing tools that you need in your repertoire. When I'm turning hems to the wrong side, then I always trim out whatever I've serged in there and let that little portion of seam that's in the hem allowance open up so that I have less bulk when I actually press and place the seam to the wrong side. Fusee web, big deal. I couldn't have sewn this garment without fusee web. With that much loft and that much drag, I needed my fusee web to really nail those hems down so that when I sewed the horizontal hems, I didn't get any rippling or ruffling. It was beautiful. It worked great. On the Barcelona, there happened to be 2 buttonholes, and the buttonholes are on the inside of the hem so that the drawstring can feed through those buttonholes. Well, even if you're making a knit garment that has buttonholes, you're going to need to be really careful and do some testing. So I used 2 layers of fusible interfacing over where I was going to sew the buttonholes. I just used my regular Japanese ultra sheer fusible interfacing, a couple of 1.5 inch squares stacked on top of one another, and I fused them down. So that when I made my buttonhole on the right side of the fabric, I also had a couple of layers of tissue paper. And I just used leftover pattern paper from whatever I've thrown away from around my tissue patterns. And that allowed me to make really nice buttonholes that didn't stretch out, which they have a tendency to do in knits. So you'll want to make a test or two on this to make sure you've got the right number of layers of things. And then in this particular case, because the buttonholes are on the hem and you don't see them on the outside, you for sure want to cut those buttonholes open before you hem, or you'll never be able to get to them. So those are some tips for sewing. And I think we have tackled Loopy French Terry. I want to mention that I have a Craftsy class called The Ultimate Guide to Sewing Knits, and it covers all of this and a lot more. It takes you through the lessons from sewing tissue weight knits to super heavyweight knits such as sweater knits and bulky knits. It shows you the binding technique that I've just shown you, so it's a really great class. You can sign up for that. I noticed today they're having a sale, like 50% off on all classes or something like that, so you might want to sign up. And then I have a tutorial sewing, what is it? What is my tutorial called? Sewing Fashion Knits, that also deals with how to sew on various weights of knits. If you're interested in making the Brando jacket, not necessarily like this, but just the whole construction of a Brando jacket with sewing the lapel, installing the zipper, lining it, all kinds of things, then you can purchase the Series 8 Sew Confident second quarter, and you'll learn all about how to construct the Brando jacket. And then there's another tutorial called Underneath It All, where I deal with underlining, which is what I did with this garment. So this whole garment was cut out both in the French terry and in the cotton knit. Then I married the pieces together, and then I sewed the garment as if it were one layer of fabric. And that's all dealt with in Underneath It All. Actually, that is a Craftsy class, Underneath It All, yeah. So we have some specials today. Pattern-wise, we have the Bristol top and dress, the Eureka top and skirt, the Brando jacket, Anne's cardigan and tank, the Barcelona top, and the East shrug, and those are all 15% off for the next week. The Sewing Fashion Knits and the Series 8 Sew Confident Brando tutorials are 15% off. The Fusible Stay Tape is 10% off, and we never discount that, so pick that up at the 10% off. And all of the fabrics, the 2 cotton jerseys, the 4 stripes, and the 3 French terries and the 3 ribbings are all on sale at 15% off. So I thank you very much for joining me again. I really appreciate it, and we will see you next week.